Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Agency. This week I have with me Melissa Lohrer. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, David. I'm excited to continue our chat from, what was it, like a week or so ago?
Yeah, no, it's funny. The backstory here is somebody made an introduction to Melissa based off of me basically wanting to talk about cold email and kind of opinions on it and its effectiveness, especially for agency prospecting or lead gen or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we ended up hitting it off
Yeah.
really greatly. We agreed on a lot of stuff. So
Yeah.
I think this should be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think that was Meredith, who's my co-host on our podcast, Agency Darlings, and she knows how I feel about that topic. So anytime she sees someone saying they're going to use cold outreach or like a lead gen agency, she's like, you need to talk to Melissa. So that's so funny. She introduced us. But yeah, I'm excited to chat more about it today.
Yeah. Well, I think, we talked about this, but a lot of times the reason they're even thinking about cold email is they really want more leads. They're thinking, I need more leads. When you hear that phrase, what do you think is really going on? How do you diagnose that?
Yeah, I think needing more leads is a symptom of other things going on in the business that it makes it easy to point to I need more leads as the problem, but often that's the symptom. Typically, and at that point, what I'll say is when you need leads, it's often too late. At that point, your expectation is there's something I can do, something I can there's some silver bullet that's going to bring me leads now. And that's also not a realistic expectation when you're kind of starting new, whatever method that you have to generate leads. So, usually when that's happening, I am looking at the agency. I'm asking more questions about the business strategy of the agency. So, um, who's your ideal client? And that they usually can't answer it, or there's a very wide audience. So it's
Mhm.
like everyone and anyone is their audience. So that's typically a red flag number one, and a reason why they have a lead gen problem that they're experiencing. Another is their positioning. So, what do you say you do, and what are you best at? And that's usually a long-winded answer. They can't quite explain it in a really simple way. So that's also a reason why they have a lead gen problem. And then I also, ask about client retention. Like, what are the engagements you have today with your clients? And do you have a form of, are you investing in organic growth in terms of how those relationships continue, how you deliver value over time to those clients? And there's usually a big question there. And they're over relying on net new business as opposed to, a lot of their business coming from their existing client base, whether that's current clients or past clients. So typically that, and then I'll, of course, the obvious answer, what have you been doing in terms of biz dev? And they say nothing. So those are the contributing factors to why there's a lead gen issue. But, starting it at that point, it's kind of too late, at least if your expectation is I'm going to close new business this month.
Right.
And there's strategies to work around that we can dig into. But those are the things I think about and diagnose when I hear we need leads.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I think, you mentioned it and, we could probably jump into that, but
Mhm.
sometimes the reason they're saying they need more leads is that they're like, I need more revenue, this month.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
so, when you hear that, where do you go? Like, what advice would you give somebody in that situation?
Yeah, the best way to close business in the short term, so 3 months or less, is going to be through existing relationships. So that's going to be current clients, recent leads that just didn't close for whatever reason, past clients, relationships you've had for a long period of time. those will be your quickest close because there's trust built there. There's, some sort of relationship. They understand what you do. They've seen what you do. Reaching out to completely new people is like, it's pretty much a shot in the dark at getting business that month. So I would start kind of from there. Within your current clients, are there opportunities to, and you don't want to look at it through a transactional lens, like who can I charge more, but more, are there things within our current scopes or projects where we can be adding more value to this client, whether it's, doing a workshop on something that they mentioned they have a problem set on, or oh, they're launching a new product. We're focusing on this product. Maybe there's a way to kind of look at both at the same time. And so I'd be looking for opportunities within current clients. If you feel like there are none, you've tapped that out, then it's going to the next level of who have we recently talked to where maybe the timing wasn't right and they didn't move forward, but we had a really good connection and they seemed really interested. Can we, check in with them, see where they're at? Are there past clients that, whether you're project-based or retainer-based, you've worked with in the past, had a great relationship, but there was a pause or the project ended. Maybe they have new needs now. Let's reconnect with them. And then the last one being, people you have relationships with, but maybe haven't worked with or pitched before that you could, that fit your ICP that you could talk to and see if there's some problems there. And then in terms of what you want to sell in those moments when it's truly like, we need to bring revenue in right now, you want to lead with sort of like entry point offers or contained offers that are low risk for the client and easy wins for you. So whether that's like, a diagnostic or a workshop or, a strategy, something that maybe isn't your full core offer engagement, but can quickly bring in, some good cash flow to make you feel a little more stable so that you can do some of the more long-term biz dev activities that will help shore things up, in the months to come.
Yeah. Well, I think you made a really good point earlier in your answer where you mentioned trust. Like that's the common thread through all this is if you basically built trust with some people and you have built no trust with other people. And so when you're doing cold outbound, you're essentially trying to build trust out of nowhere, trying to like gin it up and hope that somebody's going to convert based off of non-existent trust. Exactly. Which honestly, if somebody does convert off of non-existent trust, the retention, it would be an interesting thing to watch because my money would be that they're not going to stick around for very long.
They're probably just suckered into the deal. And then when there's a better deal, they'll move on. Trust is everything in this industry. And it's everything in the sales process, but it's everything in the relationship and retention with clients as well. Anyone listening who's lost a client or a project went south, trust was probably at the root of the issue. I just had someone in my community share that we have an agency community, and she was sharing that halfway through a project, this client pulled the plug and wants to end the engagement. And as she was sharing more, it came down to trust. The client no longer trusted their point of view when it came to they were designing a website. She went around and asked other agencies for advice, and obviously she probably gave a different brief than she gave the agency she was working with. So they were kind of like reassuring her, yeah, you're right, that this isn't representing what you want. And the relationship ended. Now, in this case, I think, this was the case of the agency working with someone that's not quite their ideal client and convincing themselves they should. And then, it went south, and those lessons are hard, but it always comes back to trust. The second you lose a client's trust, the relationship goes south. So trust is the foundation you need. Clients choose agencies, not despite what, agencies think, not on the fanciest case studies, not on the nicest website, but on the fact that they have confidence that you're going to be able to do the job, which is trust. They're trusting in you. I'm going to make this investment and you're going to help me deliver on my goals. And we need to honor that on the agency side that, we see that through. But we also have to be sensitive to the trust. There's kind of like little moments that happen in a project that if you're not paying attention, it's a slippery slope and you will lose that client. You'll never gain them back.
Mhm.
Um, and that's really important to the little moments where trust potentially could be lost, that we intervene, get things back on track. Because most of the time there's no bad intention, but I think on the agency side, we can get caught up in our own thing and we're busy serving lots of clients and those things kind of just compound and then it's too late. But
Yeah.
sales is the whole life cycle of the client. It's not, oh, I closed the project. I'm done building trust. I'm done selling. It's no, you're selling that client all the way through because if you want them to come back to you in a year or, that you want them to refer you other business, you're continuing that process of, I don't even like the word selling because it's not a sale. It shouldn't feel salesy, but you're building that relationship throughout the project. It doesn't end the second they sign a contract and give you your first payment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a really great point where you're constantly essentially like nurturing the relationship.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not just a one and done sort of thing. It's an ongoing
Yeah.
uh, process. And
Exactly.
if you
You
if you if
almost
you
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say like um, it's like in any sort of relationship. I think you have to like it's gardening or something like that. Like you have
Right.
to water it and cultivate it and stuff like that. You can't just like let it go stale.
Exactly. And then wonder where are all my vegetables and fruit, but you didn't do any planting. Um, I almost feel like you have to treat prospects like clients and clients like prospects,
Mm,
in the sense that you want to be giving your prospects the experience. You treat them like you would a client in terms of being invested in what they're doing in their business, what their goals are, understanding where they're at, and in the sales process. So whether it's your first time reaching out to them and connecting or not, that giving them that kind of like level of investment. And then for clients, treating them like they're not your client, in terms of they're not secure. They're not, it's not like, oh, we're married and like, well, even in a marriage, right? You have to constantly invest in that relationship. I think you need to continue to invest in ensuring that you're proving, that there's trust there, that you're going to deliver what was promised, that you're genuinely interested in like what their goals are. And sometimes their business goes through something or changes mid project, and agencies can get a little bit blinded to like, oh, like we just want to keep going to the finish line. But at the end of the day, if you want to be their partner, it's kind of like, okay, let's reevaluate. How can we best serve you given that, your CMO left or this thing happened? Does that change the project? Is there anything we need to do and think about differently? And um, so I don't know if that helps people to kind of like almost treat flip it and treat your prospects like clients and clients like prospects. But that's truly
yeah.
what it is.
Well, that's funny that actually kind of dovetails with I had a conversation last week with someone who's I think their agency is probably I think he said in the high seven figures.
Mhm,
Um, but all they do is they're project based. It's not
mhm,
recurring revenue based, which is you'd think, oh, how do they get that sort of revenue level
mhm,
that way? But he focuses much more on like initial projects and then lifetime value. Like, how can we continue to
mhm,
provide value? It doesn't have to be on a subscription basis. It could just be like, hey, we did a project here for 3 months, and then there's maybe a little gap, and then there's 3 more months, or
yep,
it's a series of these projects that need to be done
mhm,
uh, over time,
mhm,
um, and he's like having that sort of discipline to think more in terms of I have to constantly be thinking about kind of, you know, um, seeing where we can take the relationship next.
Yeah.
See what, how we can follow up with some additional work. Honestly, I think that even if that's not how you structure your offers and whatnot, it's a good mindset to have. And it
Totally.
totally aligns with what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. Most of my clients are actually project based. And it does present a different kind of challenge. I think there's also a freedom in being project based, but um, definitely, there's not revenue limits on being project based, or um, a lot of times I actually think retainer relationships are more at risk at going sour because there's a kind of like comfortableness that happens both on the client and agency side that can actually be damaging to the relationship. But certainly with project based, they're used to always sort of like looking for their next client, and sometimes retainer based agencies can hit a sort of like capacity or goal and feel like, okay, we can cruise, and then something happens, and then they feel like they need to start worrying about biz dev. But regardless of the business model you have, you should always be building relationships and be in a place of um, creating, as you said with the garden, like nurturing a pipeline so that if and when you do need clients, you know where you're going to secure those partnerships, as opposed to like I've kind of just I hit my goal and I'm just going to wait, and then oh my god, we just lost a client, now I need to find, where I'm going to replace this revenue. It's we could there's so many analogies for this stuff. I love also the one about the gym. It's like, do you want to go to the gym and invest in your health so you're strong and healthy, or do you want to go to the doctor when there's a problem and then feel like you then have to figure out how to get healthy and reverse
Mhm.
engineer it? It's just kind of like, a long-term view, or more of like a problematic, I need to fix the problem kind of view of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, one of the other things that we talked about was, around like founders not seeing themselves as salespeople.
Mhm. Yeah.
I feel like that could be a component to this too. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, totally. I was never like, my career agency side was, I started out in on the admin side. I was then an account person and then went into biz dev. And I was very sort of like allergic to the idea of being a salesperson within the agency. It didn't feel like my personality, and the image I had in my head was, like a Don Draper type. Like, you walk in the room and you're captivating the audience and you're really selling an idea. And that just never felt true to me. And I learned that actually my strengths as a account person and a relationship developer was actually more important than any of the like show stopping glitz and glam. And I think that's more true today than it's ever been, because of where we're at in terms of AI, and how the industry has been kind of like upended from that perspective. People are craving authenticity and human conversation more so now than ever. And that like show stopping hard sell, what I'll kind of categorize as like traditional male driven sales tactics, just
Yeah,
don't work for most people anymore. And we all know them because we get the DMs 10 times a day from
yeah,
some bot that's pushing something on us. And so I start with that because most of the agency owners I work with have that same feeling of, I'm not that person, whoever it's in their head, if it's Don Draper or someone else. They tend to be introverted. Most of my clients are women, so they have their own feelings around like, I'm not a salesperson because of their gender. Um, and so I really spend time with them, showing them like sales doesn't have to look like the way you've been taught it is. It's not door knocking, it's not cold calling. Like, that is just an outdated methods of sales. And especially in this industry where it's, as we talked about, built relationships, the good ones are built on trust, and they're built on, um, you know, like, know, and trust. I like you, I know you, I get you, I trust you.
Mhm.
So, those tactics just don't work, especially if you're selling an offer or service that's, you know, 5, 6 figures, multi 6 figures. Like, that's
Yeah.
not, it's not a tech subscription that you can try for a month and quit. It's higher risk for the marketer who's making the investment, or the business owner. So um, I think the skills that we all have as people, we all have different strengths. I think anyone can be good at building relationships, and it's just kind of like leveraging the angles that you're really good at. So if you're someone who's really intuitive and you're a great listener, that is way more important than being a great speaker when it comes to sales. A lot of times people are actually turned off by salespeople that talk at them and then leave the room, and they're like, they didn't even ask me a question about myself or my business. Yet, for some reason, someone who's a really good listener and they're maybe more, intuitive and introverted, feels like they wouldn't be good at sales, but that's actually a huge strength when it comes to sales. With most of my clients, I tell them on sales calls, talk as little as possible. That first call, I want you listening. I want you asking questions, because that's going to put you in a way better place than you selling anything, because you don't yet know what they need. So what are you selling? Like,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, I think the best thing any founder can do is really invest in getting comfortable when it comes to sales, which a lot of it's at bats. But it could also be working with someone like me, or someone who is a sales biz dev sort of like coach consultant, who can show you your skills can be applied, and kind of give you the tips that you can probably learn on your own, but maybe shortcut with working with someone who knows it a bit better and understands the industry and the way these client relationships work. And I see a lot of times, because I work with mostly agencies under $2 million in revenue, and a lot of them try to outsource sales very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and it fails every time. I've actually never seen, with the agencies I've worked with or in my community, anyone successfully outsource it. The founder is going to sell their thing way better than anyone else. And until the founder figures out what works in terms of sales and their audience, you can't hire someone to do it for you. Then they become the face of the agency. And that's a problem if you're the star of the agency and you're kind of codifying the methodologies. And so I'm really, really against doing that too early. I think after 2 million in revenue, then I think you can start bringing on support, and then slowly, get someone who's doing it with you. But I just firmly feel like um, you have to learn how to do it as the founder. Otherwise, and there's no shade to this, but like, go work for an agency and do the thing you love. You don't have to be the owner and founder of an agency if you're that uncomfortable with being the face of it. But it's also possible to get comfortable with it and learn how to do it in a way that feels good to you.
Yeah. I think too, you touched on this earlier, but like the positioning piece is
Mhm.
really helpful in all this. Like if
Mhm.
you are talking to the same, like people within the same market or with the same problem over and over and over again, like it's not going to be as uncomfortable like as it might be if you were talking to like
Totally.
a bunch of different industries where you're like,
Yes.
I know a lot about this industry, but not this one over here. And so I'm
Yes.
going to be more confident on this one, but not on this one. And I think if you're picking the same problem that you're solving over and over and over again, it's like you have more of a snowball effect in your sales confidence because
Absolutely.
you're like, oh, I've heard that question before. I know how to answer it.
Yep. And you start being able to read their mind. They'll say one thing and you're like, and of course, like, you want to ask them questions, you want to let them tell you more, but it does become like, I hear all the time, I'm very niche. I've shared like who I work with. I hear all the time, how are you reading my mind, either in my content or on the calls? And it's
Hmm.
because I know my audience so well. And yeah, there's different nuances across agencies and with, every founder's different. But yeah, you do become so comfortable that you don't have to you don't feel like you have to prepare as much. You just kind of get them. And then you get to relax and kind of focus more on chemistry. Do we have good chemistry between the two of us? Because I know I can solve their problems. They know I know what I'm doing. And now it's more of like, are we going to be good collaborators and partners?
Hmm.
So I totally agree. If you're feeling like, and when I was agency side, we worked with like all different kinds of industries, all sizes of companies. So I did often feel like, oh my God, I have to do my research before I have to, and we would be caught off guard a lot on those pitch calls because we didn't actually know their business that well. We didn't know what dynamics they were facing. And when you do choose a niche, even if it's not like you don't have to announce it, you don't have to put the positioning on your website yet, but if you just say, you know what, for this quarter, I'm going to focus on direct to consumer brands who are at this kind of like growth stage, and you have 10 or 15 calls, you're going to see the benefit of, oh my God, I'm hearing the same themes over and over. And now I know how to handle this type of client. So people can test it before they commit to anything publicly. Um, but you're totally right. If you're having conversations that are with different people all the time, it is really hard to get a grip and a confidence when it comes to these calls because you're hearing different things, different dynamics, different trends, um, different problems. And that's putting a lot of pressure on you as the agency to have that all figured out. There's no way you can be an expert in all those things at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I guess one thing I wanted to touch on is, this person who is struggling with all these things, like they're debating cold outbound. They don't see themselves as salespeople. Um, you know, this is usually the sort of problem that like somebody who's going through those feast or famine cycles
Mhm.
that happen in every agency, problems that they're experiencing. When you see feast or famine cycles happening over and over and over again, what do you see as kind of being the real thing that's broken underneath?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the stuff we talked about up front. They don't have clarity on their ideal client. They're over relying on referrals. And I want to caveat that with because I see like mixed. Sometimes I get comments on my posts about that, and they're like, referrals are great, and yeah, they are. But if you're waiting for the phone to ring, that's not a biz dev strategy. Like
Yeah.
referrals, also, I find referrals, it depends on how intentional your referral strategy is. A lot of times when the agencies I'm working with under 2 million in revenue are doing referrals, that's like them relying on their circle of friends to refer them business, not them intentionally saying, this is my audience and who are the influencers of that audience and let me build the relationships with them, that's an intentional referral strategy. But if you're kind of like relying on your core network to, help you get business, that works for a period of time, but it taps out. So um, often they're relying on referrals. So those peaks and valleys are driven by, oh, we got a bunch of phone calls, we got to take the work, and then a period of no phone calls happening, so there's no work, and then oh my God, we get a bunch of phone calls. Um, so yeah, it's all those factors. Like we've highlighted the lack of clarity on an ICP, lack of positioning, lack of any biz dev proactive effort there. Um, and you have to break the cycle or it only gets worse and it gets
Yeah.
more dramatic. And I worked in an agency where we had those peaks and valleys and it puts so much stress on the team. You ultimately burn people out and they're going to quit. Like
Yeah.
it it's not a sustainable system. Um, so you have to figure out a better way to handle the peaks where you can kind of like stack projects in a smart way that does not burn out the team, and extend them. And then you have to figure out, what do I need to be doing and when do I need to be doing it, to make sure that those valleys, you're going to have natural ups and downs. There's no like, there's, it's unrealistic to expect a consistent,
Like
especially if,
perfect linear
yeah,
uphill climb.
yeah, especially if you're project based. That's like, you're going to have months that your cash flow is high, and but you don't want them to be dramatic, because that's where the business breaks. So you want to find ways of, okay, if every 3 months we have a valley, I need to start doing, 3 to 6 months ahead of time, doing some activities that help us drive business in those lower seasons.
Mhm.
The other thing I think that often is a symptom of the peaks and valleys is undercharging, because I feel like you only take on those for the peak moments, a high volume of work, because you're sort of desperate and you are probably undercharging. So you have to do a volume to hit your revenue goal. And
Mhm.
that perpetuates the issue, and, only makes it harder for you to get back to the place you want to be. Um, so yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of contributing factors, but it's a cycle that can't be sustained. And if it doesn't break you, it'll break the business. If it doesn't break you as the founder, it'll break the business. So you have to kind of like step back and figure out what you need to do to make those highs and lows less dramatic and more sustainable, for the business and for yourself as a founder. I mean,
Yeah.
founders burn out because of those dramatic peaks and
Ups and
valleys.
downs. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I want to kind of take this full circle, because I think the first thing that led us to, start talking with each other was the cold outbound conversation.
Mhm.
And the more I've thought about it, the more I think there is a sort of cold outbound that is good, but it's not a cold outbound pitch. It's a cold relationship sort of conversation starting.
Yep. Yep.
Would you say that that's fair? Like, and
Absolutely.
it's not high volume either. It's not like this. How do I start a conversation with 1,000 people?
Yes.
It's like, who are the 50 people that I would love to build strong relationships with that would lead to a more consistent inbound
Mhm.
pipeline?
Mhm.
Okay, how do I not just go pitch those people, but go and like actually just get to know them and help them out, like all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Cold pitching and cold sales, nobody wants it. I don't know that anyone ever has. Did cold calling ever really work for anyone? Like, I grew up with those calls, and we would like hang up our landline on anyone who was cold pitching us on anything. So, um, I when I think where people go wrong is they reach out to someone that they're interested in working with, and they pitch them. Hey, we're a branding agency. We work with da da da. If you want to work with us, let us know. It's like, whoa, I don't even know who you are. What?
Hmm.
It's like interesting the behavior that happens online. Like, would you do that in person? Just walk up to someone on the street and say that? No, you'd probably introduce yourself, ask them a little bit about them. So we have to stop selling people that we don't know, because it's it's truly off-putting and damaging. Like, I don't even want to build a relationship with someone that comes at me like that. It's just like
Hmm.
too aggressive. But I do, as you said, I don't think there's anything wrong with reaching out to people to build a relationship, and I think there's thoughtful ways to do it. The best way to approach that is to be in the rooms with people that are looking to make connections that align with your ICP. So find the places that they're in and align with your strengths. So whether that's a niche conference, I love conferences that are really focused on a specific niche and they're intimate, where you're at like round tables or dinners, or it's a summit and it's all people within your audience and there's moments for connection. It's not like those 5,000-10,000 person conferences where everyone has a backpack on and you're, just like walking around all day meeting people. It's really hard to
Yeah.
build a relationship in those environments. People are there to learn and watch the stage, not to chat. Whereas there's other types of, conferences or summits where it is a little more intimate, and there's like events designed around your ICP that are happening that you can probably go to, and connection can happen there. There's so many communities out there that are dedicated to niches, whether it's like, B2B tech leaders or direct to consumer marketers. Like, you can find yourself in these communities where people are there to learn, and they're kind of, they want to make connection. So it doesn't have to be, if you're feeling lost on like, where do I start and I want to make new connections, you can find these places where that requires clarity on who your niche is to start. So
Yeah.
back to that. But also, if you see someone on LinkedIn that's on your feed that's a third degree connection and you really liked their posts, like, reach out to them and say, hey, loved the post you had on this. If you're ever up for a coffee chat, let me know. Like, but again, you're not saying, hey, I'm a, whatever, I'm a dev agency, I'd love to chat with you about your dev needs. Because in that scenario, you're making a bunch of assumptions. You're assuming they don't already have a dev agency. You're assuming they have a dev problem. And that shows just like a lack of, you're breaking trust from the beginning. You're saying, I don't really care about you. I'm going to push my thing onto you, as opposed to, I'm interested in you and your business. And maybe there's a way I can support and serve you in that way.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to end on. I think, just making sure that you're listening, you're serving, you're curious about your prospects, not just wanting to push a one size fits all thing on them. So,
Yeah. And to kind of like have a realistic timeline in place. Again, that desperate, I need to close someone this month. Those are not the right people to be seeking or having that expectation with. These are people you're like, hey, this may turn into a client in the next year or two. That's kind of the expectation you want to have. And sometimes you get lucky. There's something that comes up sooner, but going in with a low expectation and more of like, I'm genuinely curious to know if this is someone I have chemistry with, this is a business I can support, and then, having some kind of system to track those relationships, whether it's a CRM or, a manual like Notion board that you're using. But yeah.
I agree with that 110%. Well, Melissa, for folks who want to keep up with you and what you're doing, what's the best way for them to follow up with you?
Yeah. So my website's waverlyave.com. I'm on LinkedIn talking about this stuff all the time, Melissa Lohrer. And then I have a podcast called Agency Darlings that's all about agency growth. And yeah, you can find me in any of those places. And I'm always here for coffee chats. So if anyone listening, anything resonated and you want to talk, reach out. I genuinely would love to chat. And yeah, thank you so much for having me, David. I love talking with people that are in this space and on this side of things, and we can like really chat about the real situations going on together.
Yeah. Well, it's very validating too, where it's like, oh yeah, I've had that same problem come up and I've, given that same answer before, so it's like, I'm not the only person who is, thinking in that particular way. So
exactly.
It's like, I'm onto something if other people who do similar job to me are reaching the same conclusions.
Totally. And your like LinkedIn posts and graphics, like every time I see them, I'm like, yes, that captured exactly how I'm thinking too. So good to know we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for coming on the show and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you.